I'm Emily Carson. I'm 32 now, living quietly on the outskirts of Portland. All I wanted that day was to hear my parents say they were proud, just once. But even at the will reading, they couldn't do it. They gave my sister $10 million and looked right past me. Then the lawyer opened an envelope no one expected, and the room shifted. They laughed as if I weren't there. Sophia sat draped in silk, her fingers casually tracing the edge of a champagne glass, while Dad leaned in, whispering something into her ear that made her throw her head back and giggle. The room echoed with clinks of crystal and the hum of polite conversation. A fire crackled in the grand hearth, trying its best to warm a space that hadn't welcomed me in years. I sat at the far end of the long table, no place card, no glance, just a seat 2 spots away from the family core. They had arranged everything perfectly, the legacy photos behind Dad's chair, the spotlight on Sophia's recent charity gala win, and my own invisibility baked into the seating chart. "Can you pass the butter?" I asked, my voice calm. No one moved. I reached for it myself, brushing against a server who flinched, not expecting anyone to reach that far. I offered a soft smile. He nodded awkwardly and walked away. This wasn't new. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every so-called family gathering followed the same silent script. The successful daughter sparkled at the center. The quiet one was seated just close enough not to be accused of being forgotten, but just far enough not to be remembered. My mother's voice rose above the silverware. "We're so proud of Sophia. 10 million. Can you imagine at her age?" There it was. I didn't flinch. I simply lowered my eyes to my plate, pushing around a spoonful of mashed potatoes. No one asked how my business was doing. No one cared that I'd made it through the worst economy in years, keeping a team of 10 women employed through sheer grit. Sophia leaned forward, smirking. "Maybe Emily will get something too," she said sweetly, glancing at Dad. He chuckled. "She always finds her way." Right, Em. That word "find" sat like gravel in my throat. As if my path wasn't paved in the same legacy stone as hers, as if I hadn't stood outside the same ivy-covered university only to be told we could only afford one tuition at a time. I nodded once, quietly. I had come to the will reading because Grandpa had raised me more than they ever had, not out of greed. I didn't expect much. I just wanted to honor the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, how to change a tire, how to sit tall even when you were made to feel small. Mr. Franklin arrived late, as he always did, intentionally, so I suspected to create gravity. He paused at the door. "Let's begin." Everyone quieted. Even Sophia stopped her little theater of success to tilt her chin with practiced grace. But I noticed something they didn't. Mr. Franklin was holding a small sealed envelope in his left hand. It wasn't part of the folder. It wasn't on the table. It had weight. He didn't acknowledge me as he passed, but his hand brushed the back of my chair for half a second, just enough to say, "I see you." I straightened my posture. Sophia scoffed lightly and pulled out a compact mirror. Mr. Franklin cleared his throat and took his time adjusting the documents before him. He was meticulous as always, each movement deliberate, each pause calculated. The silence around the table thickened, save for the occasional clink of a glass or the shuffle of a restless foot beneath the polished mahogany. "This is the official reading of the last will and testament of Henry Carson." He began, his voice firm, but not theatrical. Dated January 14th last year. My father's eyes narrowed just slightly at the date. He hadn't spoken to Grandpa since the previous Christmas. That year, Sophia had thrown a lavish party in Aspen, and the family had all gone except for me. I stayed with Grandpa. We drank tea and watched the snow pile up in silence. That was the last time I saw him alive. Mr. Franklin continued. "First to Robert and Linda Carson. Henry leaves the family estate in Vermont and its contents. To Sophia Carson." I felt it before he said it. A pause. The tension in the air curled like steam. A financial gift of $10 million, unrestricted. Sophia beamed. "That's about right," she whispered, barely hiding her smirk. Mom squeezed her hand, and Dad chuckled under his breath as if everything was unfolding according to plan. As if I were an afterthought they were now obligated to address. "And to Emily Carson." Mr. Franklin paused again, this time longer. "Henry leaves a note. I didn't blink. I didn't frown. I only felt a strange looseness in my hands, as though I had let go of something invisible. Mr. Franklin reached for the sealed envelope I had noticed earlier. He didn't hand it to me. Instead, he opened it himself, scanned the contents, then placed it gently in front of me. It was handwritten. Grandpa's looping script. Just one line centered, "You already own what matters. Let them find out on their own." Sophia laughed. So poetic. How very... Grandpa. Mom smiled tightly as if trying to soften the humiliation. Dad nodded, almost impressed by the clever way Grandpa had managed to say nothing. Mr. Franklin said nothing more. He closed the file, then stood. The formal reading is concluded. People began to shift in their chairs, some whispering congratulations to Sophia, others already checking their phones. I sat still. I read the note again, slower this time. You already own what matters. Let them find out on their own. It didn't feel empty. It didn't feel like a dismissal. It felt like a fuse quietly lit. The server passed by again, collecting empty flutes. I handed him mine and thanked him. He nodded politely, but then hesitated. "Miss Carson," he said under his breath, "there's someone waiting for you in the side hall. Said it's private." I glanced at the note once more, folded it, and slid it into my coat pocket. Then I stood. Sophia barely looked up. "Running already?" she asked, her tone dripping with false sweetness. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. As I walked out of the room, I caught a glimpse of my father's face, confused, slightly uneasy, and Mr. Franklin. He was watching me go, the faintest trace of a smile in his eyes. The hallway outside the dining room was dimly lit, lined with tall portraits of Carson ancestors staring down from their gold-trimmed frames. I walked past them without looking up my steps, quiet on the old wooden floor. The side hall opened into a small private study, a room I remembered from childhood visits. It always smelled faintly of cedar and old ink. Mr. Franklin was waiting there, his suit jacket already folded over his arm, his tie loosened slightly. He didn't speak right away, just gestured toward the leather armchair near the fireplace. I sat. He closed the door gently behind us and leaned against the desk. "He meant every word of that note, Emily," he said finally. I looked up at him, but didn't respond. Mr. Franklin continued, his voice lower. "Henry wasn't a man who wasted ink. He left you something far more valuable than a number in a ledger. He left you leverage." I blinked. What kind of leverage? He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a second envelope, this one heavier, thicker. "This is a sealed document. It wasn't part of today's reading. Per his instruction, it's for you and you alone to decide when or if it should be shared." I took it with steady hands. The envelope had no label, just a wax seal in the shape of a pine tree, Grandpa's favorite carving motif. "You may not want to open it today," Mr. Franklin said gently. "But when the moment's right, you'll know." His eyes held mine for a moment longer before he picked up his jacket and left. I sat there for several minutes after he was gone, staring at the envelope in my lap. The seal was cool under my fingertips, untouched. I didn't open it. Instead, I slipped it inside my coat next to the note. Outside the window, snow had started to fall, big, slow flakes drifting down like ash. The kind of snow that doesn't announce itself, but transforms everything in silence. I rose, pushed the chair back in, and stepped out into the hallway. In the main foyer, my family was posing for photos, Sophia in the center holding her check like it was a trophy. My mother was fixing her hair. My father was laughing at something a cousin said. None of them noticed me, and I didn't interrupt. I passed behind them, silent and unseen, and opened the front door. The cold hit me like truth. Sharp, clean. I walked down the stone steps, hands deep in my coat pockets. The envelope pressed lightly against my side with each step. As the heavy door closed behind me, I didn't look back. They could celebrate their win. I had just started playing a different game. The next morning, the house buzzed with a strange kind of cheer, the kind that came when something big had happened and no one quite knew how to behave. The formal reading was over, but my parents had decided to extend the stay at the estate for one more day, turning the somber gathering into something closer to a celebration, or at least Sophia's celebration. A brunch was arranged in the sunroom, white tablecloths, fresh fruit champagne flutes lined in perfect rows. I found a seat by the window furthest from the center. No one had asked me where I wanted to sit. Sophia walked in wearing a pastel blue dress and heels that clicked with every step like punctuation marks. She was glowing, no other word would fit. The check was gone, but not the energy of it. Her voice was louder than usual, her smile wider. Every story she told somehow circled back to what I'm thinking of doing with the money. "I don't want to just sit on it," she said brightly, spinning a mimosa between her fingers. "I've always had ideas, you know. Maybe open a boutique in Aspen, or invest in that eco-startup I told you about. Daddy, you remember that one, right?" My father nodded, eyes twinkling. "Of course. You've always had vision." Linda chimed in from across the table. "You've had style since you were 6. I knew even then you were meant for more than this town." I looked down at my coffee. No one asked what I was planning to do. Mr. Franklin hadn't returned that morning, and I didn't mention the envelope. It sat in my suitcase untouched, the seal unbroken. I wasn't ready yet, not to open it, and definitely not to explain it. Across the table, a cousin leaned toward me. "Emily, are you still doing that museum work?" Her voice was casual, but her eyebrows arched slightly like she wasn't sure if it counted as a real job. "I am," I said. Right. That's the one where you categorize artifacts or something." I nodded once. She smiled politely and turned back to her smoked salmon. The conversation moved on without pause. Later, while people lingered with coffee and lemon tarts, Sophia made her way to the center of the room with a clink of her glass. "I just wanted to say how grateful I am," she said, her voice just shy of teary. "To my parents, of course. And to Grandpa, who always believed in me. I feel so honored to carry forward the Carson name in my own way." Applause followed, warm, eager, a few standing claps. I didn't join in. She didn't thank me. But her eyes flicked to me, briefly, lips curving in a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. A soft, triumphant sort of smile. Afterward, as people mingled and moved toward the back lawn, Sophia passed by my chair. She didn't stop, just leaned in close enough to whisper, "I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always were resourceful." I looked up at her. "Thanks." And then quietly, "Congratulations." Her heel caught a slight edge in the rug, and for a second she stumbled, just a flicker. But she recovered and walked on without looking back. I stayed seated. Outside, I could hear laughter beginning again, champagne corks, the thump of music from someone's phone. It was still her day. I wasn't even on the program. That afternoon, I escaped the estate for a while. I walked along the gravel road that curled past the pond and into the woods. The branches overhead filtered sunlight into speckled gold. I used to love this place as a child, this path in particular. Grandpa had walked it with me once, pointing out bird calls, teaching me the difference between spruce and fir. Back then, it had felt like we shared something, quiet understanding, a mutual respect. Now I wasn't so sure. The sealed envelope stayed tucked in my coat pocket. I ran my fingers across it like it might tell me something through the paper. It didn't. By the time I returned to the house, the sun was sinking behind the trees, and the party had moved into the living room. People lounged on leather couches, talking over each other with the ease of old money. The fireplace glowed with staged perfection. Sophia was in the center again, holding court. This time it was about a foundation. "I want to start something that matters," she said, chin lifted. "A women's empowerment initiative. Maybe scholarships for underprivileged girls." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Linda cooed. "You've always been so giving." Robert raised his glass. "Just like your grandfather. He'd be proud." They all toasted. I stood in the doorway. No one noticed. Then Sophia turned, spotting me. She smiled and patted the seat beside her on the armrest of the couch. Come join us. We were just talking about your museum work. So fascinating." The seat she gestured toward was half occupied, barely room to perch. Her tone was sugar-laced. I stepped forward slowly and sat not beside her, not on the armrest, but on the empty chair just behind. Still visible, still not quite part of the circle. Sophia continued. Emily's work is so interesting, cataloging history, right? It's like she lives in the past. But hey, someone has to keep the old stories alive. Soft laughter bubbled around her words. I smiled faintly and said nothing. She wasn't cruel, that was the trick. It was always a little offhand, a little sweet, coated in plausible deniability. But every word was a needle. Later, as people broke off into smaller groups, I stood near the bookshelves. Mr. Franklin arrived then, slightly late still in his crisp gray suit. He nodded at me across the room. I gave a small nod back. He didn't approach right away. Instead, he greeted Robert, and Linda shared a brief word with Sophia. She looked curious, maybe even a little wary. He didn't stay long in their circle. Then he drifted toward me. We met by the old oak credenza. His voice was low. Have you opened it? I shook my head. Not yet. You should, he said. Soon. It's important. He didn't elaborate. Instead, he reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a smaller envelope. This is for you too. Separate from the one you already have. My brows knit. What is it? He didn't answer directly. Read both before tomorrow. And don't say anything yet. Let the room speak first. Then he was gone. I held both envelopes, one in each hand, and felt their weight settle into me like stones in water. That evening during dinner, I noticed the difference. The way people looked at Sophia, still warm but curious now. The way they looked at me, less dismissive, more questioning, like they sensed a shift but couldn't place it. Robert asked me to pass the butter. Small yes, but he hadn't spoken to me directly all day. Sophia didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did. Her stories came quicker now, less polished. She talked about brands and influencers. It didn't land the same way. I caught Linda watching me once, then glancing away just as quickly. Something was happening. The room didn't know what, but it was starting to lean in. The air that night inside the estate felt heavy with something unspoken. Laughter rang out in waves, but underneath it was a current, unsettled, curious waiting. Sophia still moved like a star, graceful, confident, practiced. But I noticed her eyes darting more, scanning the room. She caught me talking with Mr. Franklin near the bay window, and her smile faltered just slightly. When dessert was served, mini tarts with sugared berries, Sophia stood up, tapping her glass. Everyone, she said, her voice bright, before we all disappear for the night, I just want to thank you all for being here. And especially, she turned toward our parents. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for your incredible generosity. This check, she held it up still in the envelope, will help me make a difference. I promise. Applause followed. A few people stood. Linda dabbed her eyes. Then Sophia turned toward me. Emily, I hope you'll come visit the foundation office when it's ready. Maybe we can hang some historical prints on the walls, add that old soul charm of yours. There was a small pause, a half laugh from someone in the corner. I didn't respond. I simply placed my dessert fork down carefully. Mr. Franklin watched me, then looked away. Afterward, when the evening had thinned and the house quieted, I found myself alone in the guest room Grandpa used to sleep in. The wallpaper was faded, the bookshelf still lined with his war memoirs and biographies. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the first envelope. Inside, a short handwritten note in Grandpa's careful cursive, for Emily, the one who sees without needing to speak. The land and the archive are yours. Use them wisely. I didn't cry. I opened the second envelope from Mr. Franklin. It was legal. A deed, a transfer of ownership, Grandpa's private land, nearly 80 acres, and his personal historical collection over to me, effective immediately upon the will reading. I stared at the documents, then folded them carefully and placed them back in their envelope. No triumph, no vindication, just clarity. I wouldn't say anything. Not yet. But I knew what was coming. The next morning, people gathered again for brunch before departing. It was more casual, linen pants, cardigans, soft jazz playing in the background. I came down late, holding both envelopes in my hand, sealed again. Mr. Franklin met me at the base of the stairs. "You're ready?" I nodded. He cleared his throat and stepped into the dining room. "I'd like to request a moment," he announced. "Before we conclude this gathering, your grandfather asked that I share one final update." Heads turned. Robert lowered his coffee cup. Linda's brow creased. Sophia tilted her head, a small frown forming. Mr. Franklin continued calm and clear. As per a separate instruction not included in the will itself, but notarized and witnessed, Mr. Harold Carson requested a private transfer of certain personal holdings to Ms. Emily Carson, effective immediately. Silence. He wished this to be shared after other matters were settled. Sophia sat up straighter. What kind of holdings? Mr. Franklin smiled faintly. The Carson Historical Archive and the attached land. All 80 acres. There was a pause, a breath held by the room. Then Sophia laughed short and sharp. The archive. That place with all the dusty books, Emily. What are you going to do with that? I met her eyes. Preserve it. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Well, good for you. Linda looked at Robert. He was unreadable. No one else spoke. And that was enough. I turned, walked toward the glass doors, and stepped outside into the morning sun. The air felt lighter. Behind me, the room stayed quiet. The press conference was never part of the plan. I hadn't planned to speak. I hadn't even planned to attend. But when the local historical society invited me to accept the archival grant my grandfather had quietly nominated years ago on behalf of the Carson Family Trust, I understood why he had waited until now. It was a quiet morning, the kind where fog clings low and everything feels softer. I wore navy slacks, a cream blouse, and flats. Nothing flashy, just steady. The venue was intimate stone walls, wooden beams, rows of chairs lined up before the podium, where a simple banner read, "Preserving our past, building our future." Sophia arrived late. She slipped into a seat in the back, sunglasses still on, though we were indoors. Her posture was tight. She hadn't responded to my message letting her know I'd be there. When they introduced me as Emily Carson, head curator of the Harold Carson Archives, the air shifted. I stepped to the podium, hands steady, the weight of Grandpa's legacy resting quietly in the envelope in my bag. Thank you, I began, eyes sweeping across familiar and unfamiliar faces. My grandfather believed history is best preserved not in glass cases, but in the lives of those who learn from it. Today I accept this grant on behalf of the vision he built, not alone, but with quiet conviction. I didn't look at Sophia. I didn't need to. The applause was modest but genuine. I stepped down without lingering. Outside, beneath the old sycamore tree that shaded the back courtyard, I felt a presence behind me. I didn't turn. So this is what you meant, Sophia said, her voice low. I waited. She stepped closer. You planned all this? Waited to let them hand me that check? And then you show up with land and a legacy? I finally looked at her. No, I said. I didn't plan it. Grandpa did. Her mouth tightened. He always favored you. I shook my head. No. He trusted me. Sophia didn't reply. Instead, her eyes dropped to the folder in my hand, the one bearing the state seal. Is that the filing? She asked. I nodded. The land's now registered as a public heritage site. It'll never be sold or developed. His collection stays intact, accessible. For free? She asked, almost disbelieving. Yes. There was a long silence. Sophia laughed once, breathy. They'll write about you, you know. Maybe even forget I got 10 million. I didn't ask them to, I said. She looked at me again, longer this time. I wouldn't have done it, she said finally. I know. She turned and walked back toward the parking lot. Her heels clicked once, then slowed. Behind me, a soft voice, Ms. Carson. It was a young reporter, notebook in hand. May I quote you on that last line? I smiled faintly. Which part? The part about trust. I didn't answer, just walked past him through the gate into the bright afternoon. Inside the hall, they were still murmuring. Some had begun whispering to one another, exchanging glances toward the doorway I had just exited. No one asked where Sophia went. No one questioned the shift. And I didn't turn back. Later that evening, after the event, I returned to Grandpa's old farmhouse, the one now preserved as a public archive. It hadn't changed much. The same wooden porch, the wind chime he hung decades ago, still jingled faintly in the breeze. I let the silence settle in, grounding me. Inside, Mr. Franklin was waiting. He'd asked to speak briefly after the ceremony. He stood beside the old fireplace, hands folded neatly. "You handled today with grace, Emily," he said. "I just did what he asked. You did more than that." He handed me a small leather-bound notebook. "He wanted you to have this." The cover was worn. My hands hesitated before opening it. Inside were Grandpa's notes, sketches, records, handwritten thoughts about legacy, responsibility, and timing. Power. One line read, "Is not in claiming what's owed, but in protecting what should never be lost." I closed the book and held it against my chest. "He never needed applause," I said quietly. Mr. Franklin nodded, but he always knew how to create a moment that echoed. We sat for a few minutes in silence. Then the door creaked open. It was my mother. Linda Carson, still impeccably dressed, though her eyes looked tired. She stepped inside like someone unsure whether she belonged there. "I saw the news," she said. "Online. Your picture's already on the city website." I offered her tea. She declined. "I never knew he planned to give you the land," she continued. "He didn't. He planned to protect what mattered. I just happened to be the one who listened." Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "We thought you were being difficult, always quiet, always working, and you thought Sophia was the legacy." Linda blinked. I'd never said that out loud before. "She was so bright," she said. "Easy to present. You stayed in the background." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. "Your father was proud today," she added, almost a whisper. I looked up. He didn't say it. She rushed to clarify, but I could see it in his face. There was a beat of silence. "Will you come for dinner tomorrow?" she asked, hesitant. "Just us. No cameras, no checks, no ceremonies. I'll think about it." She gave a small nod as if she expected that answer. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "I used to think you were too soft," she said. "Turns out you were just quiet." After she left, I returned to the archive room. The lights were dim, but Grandpa's handwriting on the display cards seemed to glow faintly under the glass. I unlocked a cabinet in the back one only I had access to now and placed the notebook inside between his war medals and a folded letter I hadn't read yet. On the way out, I flipped the closed sign. The air was cool now. Evening had fully set in. Across the street, a couple stood at the bus stop, the man pointing at the small plaque just beneath the window, the Harold Carson Archive, curated by Emily Carson. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. They saw it. They saw me. And they didn't look away. The next morning, I woke to an inbox flooded with messages. Some were from local journalists. Others were strangers, mostly women, thanking me for what I'd stood for. I hadn't made any speeches. I hadn't posted anything. And yet somehow my silence had echoed further than I ever imagined. I scrolled through one message from a woman named Margaret. She wrote, "I watched the live stream. When you stood there and didn't say a word, it said everything. Thank you." It felt strange being thanked for simply existing in full view. At noon, I walked into the downtown archive office, my new workplace. It was quiet, the kind of quiet you could settle into. A young intern greeted me with a nervous smile. "Morning, Ms. Carson." I smiled back. "Just Emily's fine." She relaxed. "There are fresh flowers in the reading room. A woman dropped them off earlier. No name. I found them pale blue hydrangeas tied with twine. There was no card. But the scent brought me back to childhood, to Grandpa's garden, where I'd sit beside him while he explained the stories behind each bloom. Later in the afternoon, I received one more visitor, Sophia. She stood at the entrance, unsure whether to enter. "Do you want to come in?" I asked. She stepped forward slowly. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." She looked down, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "Mom and Dad, they don't know how to deal with this." "Neither do I replied honestly. I thought I was the chosen one. For so long I really believed it. And I acted like it. I'm sorry." The words hung between us. "I was angry at you," she continued, "for not fighting back, for not trying harder to be part of things. But now I see, maybe you were just choosing not to play a rigged game." I didn't respond. Not yet. She took a seat. "Can I ask something?" Sure. Do you want to rebuild this? Us as sisters. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I paused. Maybe I said, but not as a project, as a choice, on both sides. She nodded. That's fair. We sat in the reading room a while. She asked about the archives. I showed her a few of Grandpa's favorite documents, including one letter he'd written during his deployment addressed simply to my granddaughter, whoever she turns out to be. Sophia smiled at that. He always did have his ways. When she finally left, I didn't walk her out. I didn't need to. This space was mine now. And she knew where to find me, not because I followed, but because I stayed. That evening, I locked up as the sun dipped behind the skyline. The golden light caught on the windows, making everything glow a little warmer. Outside, traffic passed as usual. No fanfare, no parade, just life. I looked up at the sign one last time, the Harold Carson Archive. Below it, in smaller letters, a newer edition, Director Emily Carson. I adjusted my coat, stepped onto the sidewalk, and walked into the settling dusk. Not with fanfare, but with weight, with peace, and with every step a quiet reckoning. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with a quiet room, a closed door, and the weight of things finally put down. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is stay exactly where they said she didn't belong and wait for the silence to speak for her.